Hi everybody, it's Tuesday night. It's a little after 7. Sorry for the small delay. We're trying out this new system where we have a double screen, so it took a little bit of troubleshooting. But I'm so happy that you're here. So every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, I have a half an hour where I'm just talking about all things desserts. And tonight, I thought I would love to share with you how to jazz up your buttercream game and to have fun with adding fun flavors to your buttercream. So I had this idea in my head, like, why don't we try to do a live video of me decorating a cake and me just showing you how to add fun flavors to your buttercream so it's not boring and it's a little bit more exciting and fun. So my name is Jen Barney. I'm the owner of Meringue Bakery. I'm Food Network Season 4 Holiday Baking Champion. And we live we live right next to La Crosse, Wisconsin. And we have this bakery where we make really fun, beautiful gourmet desserts. And I am a huge advocate for having fun with flavor. And tonight I wanted to show you how to frost a cake, but then also how to add some fun elements to your buttercream to make it a little more interesting. And just to have I feel like people are scared to try new things, right? Because you have your set recipe that you know how to use. And I say, get out of your comfort zone and let's try something new here. Hi, everybody. So for those of you who are just joining, today I'm doing a live video on how to make a cake. And I'm really excited about this. More specifically, we're having fun with flavors with our buttercream. And to get started, I want to share with you one of my best tips on how to prep your buttercream when you're making a cake. Now, I find so many new bakers, even new professional bakers, they don't know how to get smooth the buttercream. And the biggest, it just drives me crazy whenever I see pictures of professional grade chefs who have a buttercream that's really pocky on the outside, that it has a rough buttercream finish. But this is the tip on how to avoid that. The biggest thing that you need to do is you need to have enough buttercream in your mixer bowl so that it covers the top of the paddle. So if you can see my mixing bowl right here, I've been whipping this for probably about 15 minutes before we started. And when I'm whipping this, or when I'm paddling it, the buttercream comes all the way up to the top of this paddle, if you can see what I'm talking about here, where I'm not allowing any air to access as I'm paddling. Because if the paddle was this high and it started whipping, you would be incorporating all of that air into your mixing bowl, which is going to in turn give you lots of air bubbles when you try to frost your buttercream. So you get that paddle all the way down, and then you start paddling, and you let this paddle for probably, you could let it go for a good half an hour or more. Now this works with all different types of buttercream: traditional American buttercream, Swiss buttercream, French buttercream. It all is the same. If you fill up your bowl to the top so that paddle is fully covered, you're going to have a nice smooth buttercream. Now I have in this bowl a Swiss meringue buttercream, which is the reason why actually I named my business Meringue Bakery, because this buttercream starts off with making, it has a meringue base, so we add butter to it. So right now, as it sits, this buttercream is a plain vanilla buttercream. But I want to share with you, because Valentine's Day is coming up, how to turn this into a champagne, raspberry, and white chocolate buttercream. Now this technique works with all forms of buttercream. You can do this with American buttercream. You can start incorporating jams, curds, fresh juice, fresh berries. It's really a hodgepodge. A buttercream can be a blank canvas for a ton of different flavors. So as I'm demonstrating this, if anybody has any questions in the live feed, please, by all means, let's have some questions. I see maybe one of them can come in. Hi. So Wanda says she cannot see my face. Now, is that true across the board? Because I can see my face in the live feed, but maybe, I don't know. We don't know what we're doing. We're just trying out something new tonight. Please let me know if we need to troubleshoot that, or if it's not working, we can always go back. But it sounds like you can see this part of the screen, which is maybe the most important. Not that my face isn't important, but at least you can see what I'm doing when I'm making this buttercream. So right now, I have a bowl that's to the brim of a Swiss meringue buttercream, and to it, I'm adding melted white Belgium chocolate. Now this chocolate is very warm. I'm entering it in. Okay, so other people say they can see my face. Well, we'll just go with that. We can troubleshoot that later for you, Wanda, but I'm going to keep moving along. I am a huge advocate for using a good quality white chocolate. I think it makes a big difference in your final product. The product that I like to use is a product called Calabo. I can order it in. It's a company from Belgium, and they make a really beautiful, smooth white chocolate. Now, when you add melted chocolate into your buttercream, you really do need to make sure that it's fully melted and that it's warm, because if it's not, you have a chance of it hardening before you start to mix it in, and then you're going to get little clumps of white chocolate, which is no good. That's going to cause a lot of problems later when you're trying to frost. And even I sometimes have an issue with adding white chocolate if I don't mix it all the way in. But it's very important that you incorporate it fully if you want to get that nice white chocolate flavor. Because it's warm now, but if it's not fully incorporated and you let it sit for a half an hour, it's going to start getting harder, and you're going to get these little chunks of white chocolate bits in it, and at that point, it's going to be harder to frost. If you have any questions coming in, I'm going to just say let's give this live feed an open mic night. So if you guys have any questions for me, I'll just start answering the live feed as I see it come in. And in the meantime, I'm showing you how to have fun with buttercream and how to mix in fun flavors into your buttercream. Now, those of you who can see this buttercream has been paddled for about 20 minutes before we started, so it's very smooth. And it looks beautiful, nice, soft, and supple, and I'm very happy with how it looks. Now from here, I'm going to have a little bit more fun with this, and I'm going to add some straight up champagne. Now, whenever I add any type of liqueurs into my baking, I always use the cheap stuff, because I feel like you lose. I mean, if you've got the expensive liqueur, expensive champagne at your house, by all means, add her in. But if you're buying something specifically for baking, you don't need the expensive stuff, because it gets mixed in with so many other flavors that you kind of lose the beauty of why you'd want it to be expensive. So we're just using the cheap champagne here, the Andre champagne that you can get anywhere, the staple champagne. And this has a high liquid content, and as I'm mixing it in, I notice that my spatula is not doing the job as well as it should. So I'm gonna move to a whisk. So I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna grab a whisk. So if you look in here, you can see little bits where the champagne is still not quite mixed in. So if I just take a minute here and I whisk this in, it'll fully incorporate. Sometimes it takes just a little bit of time for this buttercream to fully incorporate. Today, this buttercream reminds me of our new Valentine's Day menu that we just posted today. It has a pink champagne buttercream in it. A cake, I should say, a pink champagne cake in it with this a very similar buttercream that's on there. We are gearing up for Valentine's Day, everybody in the bakery. It's a fun time. You know, Valentine's Day ends up being one of the busiest weeks out of the year because everybody wants their chocolate. You know, one of the best parts about this past week, for me personally, I gave this really great speech at Thursday at the Lacrosse Rotary. They have the weekly meeting, but it was actually a quite large turnout, and I had a blast talking with everybody, and I think it was a good success, and everybody was so nice, and I talked about my experience on the show, and you know, I have to say, the city of La Crosse has been so amazing to me, and I've been incredibly lucky. And every time I meet with the public like that, I just feel so much support. It was fantastic. So as I was talking, I was whisking in the rest of that champagne, and you can see now that it's fully incorporated, where before it wasn't quite. And now I'm adding some raspberry jam in here. So this jam we make in-house. It is the raspberries from Trempolo. And I cook them low and slow, the raspberries that I get in. And I don't add a ton of sugar to it. I just let the natural pectin thicken the raspberries. And I feel like that low temperature really helps it, that pectin kind of set up over time. So the raspberries are nice and tart, which, you know, sometimes when you're making desserts, it's not good to have a bunch of sweet, especially when you're making cake. You want a little bit of acidity to brighten up your flavor profile. And that's what this raspberry jam is going to do. It's also going to give this buttercream a beautiful pink color. And we're almost done with this buttercream. So at this point now, this buttercream has 3 different things in it. It has a raspberry jam, a white chocolate, a Belgian white chocolate in it, and then it also has just straight up champagne added to it. At home, whenever you're making a buttercream, you can buy something specifically from the store. You can buy frozen fruit that you can thaw out, and you could add straight up just de-thawed raspberries to this. That would work. You could also, I know you can buy, there's a lemon curd that you can buy in the jam section. That's I think it's in the pie filling section actually. That is I actually think it's not a bad product, and you could add this to that. There's a lime curd and a lemon curd that you can usually find. You could add peanut butter to this. That would be so fantastic. You could add dark chocolate. Let your buttercream be a blank canvas for a ton of flavors. This is great too if you're making cupcakes at home. To have a lot of variety, so you could make one batch of buttercream and one batch of cupcakes, but then you can break up that buttercream into several different compartments, and then you can you could make different flavors of buttercream with them, and you could have a bunch of different types of cupcakes, a huge variety, just based off of one batch. So it'd be a time saver, but people would never know that you made it easy on yourself by just flavoring up the buttercream with different types of flavors. So as I see this feed coming in, I'm really curious if people want to chime in and let me know where they're listening from. I would really enjoy seeing the scope of where my live feed is going. So if you want to chime in and let me know where you're at, I would love to hear that. Derek says, Jen, thank you so much for doing our wedding cake. Aw, thanks, Derek. Derek had this really fun cake that we did. It had lots of gold and pink and ruffles. It was very feminine. It was at the waterfront. And it was a gorgeous wedding. You know, whenever we make wedding cakes, one of the best tips that I can give is to soak your cakes with a simple syrup. Now, if your cake happens to be incredibly moist, like sometimes I have carrot cake that I wouldn't add a simple syrup to because it's already so moist as it is. But sometimes cake just needs a little bit of help, especially if you overbake by just a little bit, and it's a little bit on the dry side. So what we do to combat dryness in cake, but also to add even more moisture, is to put some simple syrup in your cakes. Now, simple syrup is really easy to make. You get a small saucepan, and you add equal parts sugar and equal parts water to it, and you boil it up. You can also add some vanilla to it. You could, in the bakery, at times throughout the year, I'll take lemon zest, orange zest, and I'll boil it in with this simple syrup water so that the water can be infused with citrus. You could literally, we do a lot of liqueur, right? So we could be adding some really fun liqueurs to this, like rum or frangelico, to really jazz up that flavor profile. So the next time that you're making a cake, and if you want to make it extra fancy, use a simple syrup. And what's great about simple syrups too is if you're having a party, it's a core ingredient for a lot of alcoholic mixers. So, and it lasts forever. I mean, maybe not forever, but it would last probably 3 to 4 months in your refrigerator once you have it. So I have my cake round, and this is just a basic white cake that we have. And if at home, if you don't have one of these squeeze bottles, you could just use a brush or even a spoon to put over the top of your cake. But I'm going to squeeze a little bit of this simple syrup onto this cake. And I'm going to layer this cake with this beautiful raspberry pink champagne buttercream. I really enjoy having a thick layer on a cake, so I like to put ample amounts, especially when there's this buttercream is so much fun with all those different flavors in it. One layer down, another one on top. Now, when you're building a cake, it's really important. This is probably one of the most important rules is that you can never build. Well, you could, but it's not a good idea. It's never a good idea to build a warm cake. So you want to make sure you bake off your cake, you refrigerate it, you let it chill, and then you start building it. Because if you take it out of the oven and you let it come to room temperature and you're trying to build it, there's a high chance that it's going to fall apart because it's just it needs time to tighten up. Mary has a fantastic idea. I think Mary is probably craving mojitos because she's saying you should make a mint-infused simple syrup and then go make yourself some mojitos, which is a very good idea. Now, I just put my top layer of simple syrup on my cake, and I'm going to take my spatula and smooth out that simple syrup, because if I were to add buttercream right on top of this, it hasn't had time to soak in yet, and it would be kind of like oil and water, that kind of same effect. So I'm just going to give this maybe 30 seconds or so for that simple syrup to soak on in. And in the meantime, I'm going to scrape in some of this buttercream on the sides here. Whenever you make a buttercream cake, it's always a good idea to do a crumb coat on it. Now, a crumb coat is where you have your raw, naked cake that is exactly what you see in front of you right now. And I'm putting a very thin layer of buttercream around it. So my goal is, I have a couple goals with this crumb cake, or crumb coat. The first is that I want to make sure that my cake is nice and level, because if it's a little bit wonky or crooked or this is where I can correct that problem. And it happens to me even as a professional, that the cake isn't quite level at this point, or there's one layer of cake that's kind of jutting out a little bit. If you notice one edge of your cake that's really coming out, like for example, this cake is not that bad because it was nice and cold, but I would say, it's hard to tell, but on this cake, I just scraped on it. There's a little piece right here. Can you see that? Where it's a little bit, it's protruding a little bit from that edge. Now this side is going to cause me problems when I go to frost my cake, because any point that juts out, can you see any point that juts out when you try to frost, you're going to either have to, you always have to overcompensate, so you have to put more buttercream to hide that spot than what is desirable. So either going, as for a business, that's not a very good idea, because you always try to get minimal food costs, right, whenever you make a cake. But also, aesthetically, it's not very pretty. So if I am at home and I see that there's one part of my cake that's not quite nice and straight, all I have to do is take my finger and just try to adjust that cake a little bit. And it was that easy. Now I can go back in and frost this cake. I'll try to do that crumb coat one more time. And hopefully, by me just trying to adjust that just ever so slightly, that's going to cause me a lot less headache later on. So now I've given that top just a little bit of time to for that simple syrup to soak right on in. And I can put my top crumb coat on here. If you're at home and you have, and if you're preparing, if you're making this in advance, like a day in advance or even a half a day in advance, it's always the best to take this crumb coat and let it chill. because that's going to lock in all of those crumbs, and it's going to give you a nice firm structure that you can build your final buttercream coat on. Tonight, and this cake was, I do have to say, my layers were they just had just come out of the fridge, which is quite nice, so this is nice and firm. So as I'm doing this on my live feed, I'm going to go in and frost it immediately. Thanks everybody for listening. For those of you who just joined, my name is Jen Barney. I own Meringue Bakery, and we are having fun with buttercream tonight. So tonight we've made a buttercream that has a raspberry jam added to it, Belgian white chocolate, and then champagne. So there's 3 flavors that are added to this buttercream, and you can do this at home with anything. So I'm even thinking you could do you could take caramel sauce and ground up toasted nuts, and you could make a praline buttercream. I mean, the sky's the limit. It's a blank canvas, and I think the whole point is utilizing what you already have and what your tastes are at home, and having fun with it, because there's no rules. I mean, you could make confetti buttercream and add a bunch of sprinkles to it, and that would be adorable to eat too. If anybody has any questions coming in, I'm more than happy to look at this live feed and answer questions as we go. Let me scoot down here a little bit. Courtney says she adds orange zest to her favorite cookie last week, and it got rave reviews. I'm telling you, I'm a huge fan for zesting, and you could even zest into your buttercream too to add some good flavor. Now this cake, and how I'm going to frost it, is going to be a little bit rustic, just because we have those raw raspberry seeds on there. I think it's still going to look beautiful. So as I'm frosting, it's a good idea to put a little bit too much frosting on as we're doing this final coat, because you can always take off and scrape off. So it's best to put more on for the first time, so you don't have to go through and add more later on, because then we end up starting all over. At this point, if you were to see some crumbs, I don't see any crumbs, but if you were, just totally normal, I would say get rid of those crumbs as fast as possible, because crumbs are no good, and they end up causing more problems later on if you don't deal with the problem straight away. So I would say pick out any crumbs that you see at this point. And from here, I have a sloppy decorated cake, but we're going to take a nice cake scraper. But you can see here I'm using a Wilton, a straight edge, but you can still keep your, this offset tool is really something that you should probably have in your bake or your home. I'm trying to think, like, there's a pie server. If you have a pie server that has a straight edge, this would work as well if you're in a pinch. So at home, if you just have an offset spatula, you could start using it to smooth out your cake. Now in the bakery, you know, for regular day-to-day orders that go out, we use our eyes to determine if the cake is nice and level. But for wedding cakes, we actually have a level, like a construction level or whatever something that you'd have. We bought it from Menards, and we get it out and we make sure that our cake edges are level, and we also make sure that the tops are level, because when you're building a tiered cake, it's got to be level. So for home use, what I'm doing is I'm going around and I'm just thinning this out. I feel like, though, if it's something that you're interested in, or if you want to do some cake decorating, it's worth getting a nice straight edge like this. And you know, one of the best tips that I have, oh, it looks like my screen froze. Oh, well, people said they can see it just fine, so I'm going to keep going with it. I was quiet for a minute because I thought it wasn't working. But we're just going to keep rolling. We're still good. Okay, awesome. Sorry I was quiet there. I was waiting for my husband to come down to save me, but apparently I didn't need any saving. Okay, so now that I can keep going, I have this straight edge. And one of the best tips that I can give, if you can see my elbow, is you lock this into your hip, because that gives you a nice, stable foundation for you to frost your cake on as you smooth it out. Also, when you look at your straight edge, you want to make sure that it's perfectly vertical. Can you see what I'm doing here? And that when you go in, that your straight edge isn't like this or it isn't like this, because that's going to end up making your cake edge kind of wonky as you go. So I have this cake that I feel like the edges are quite nice on. And this is the other tip that I have. The person who taught me how to decorate cake, she explained it like this. You swoop in, like you're landing a plane. So I'm taking my offset spatula, and I'm swooping in and I'm knocking down those edges. Like I'm landing a plane. You know, my first bakery job was at the Queen of Cakes in Edina, Minnesota. And it was when I was in culinary school at Le Cordon Bleu. And the owner, Terry Leckis, was a fantastic woman who taught me the basics, the foundation of everything that I ended up, yeah, she's a really cool lady. Love her. Terry Leckis, fantastic woman. She would say things like, get rid of the crumbs in your cake, because crumbs are like the drunk at a party, because they just end up causing problems. So just like, get rid of those crumbs. That's what she used to say. Okay. So on my screen that I see, my husband just helped me out here because I see a frozen screen, but he just helped me out, so now I can see your comments and questions. Thank you, Brian Barney. Brian, it's so funny, you guys. This is our setup, right? So the bakery's in the basement, and this is where we do all of our work. But upstairs, we have our children and my husband. And it's even funny because as I'm doing this, I can hear Millie crying. Oh, that's just our life sometimes. Or, you know, I have my husband coming in and helping me out, trying to make this all work. Sometimes we just fly by the seat of our pants. So I have this very rustic decorated cake that I think is a good solid foundation, and I think at this point let's start decorating it. So we have a tip here, and it has a coupler in it. So I'm a huge advocate for investing in a pastry bag that has a coupler set. And this is what I mean. This is what I mean by this. It is a little, it's called a coupler, and what's cool about it is you can put it inside of a pastry bag, and then we can start interchanging out all these fun tips on top or on our pastry bag. So I am using, because there's seeds in this buttercream, I'm intentionally using wide tips, because if I were to use a small tip, like something like this, those little seeds would get caught in there all the time. So it'd be easier for me to use a wide tip. If anybody has any questions, Debbie, did you make, I see Debbie said she made the almond pound cake. Now, was that David's recipe that I shared last week? Because if it was, I'm really glad that you tried that out for us. My brother-in-law, Bud, would want me to know if I can teach my sister to make this. Bud, watch yourself. So whenever you fill a pastry bag, I think it's human nature to want to overfill it. So we have a piping bag that I've twisted off halfway through. This gives me a lot more leverage, because if I were to go up here, especially if you're piping a lot, it can be really hard on your hands. So I say make it simple for yourself. What's trendy right now in the dessert world are these, like, I don't know what you call them. I would maybe call them like little star kisses, maybe. So I am using a pastry bag just to literally pipe like a half crescent mood, and let's try to get some fun shapes in here. So I am going to try to use a different star tip. Let's see how this works out and see what this looks like. So I'm literally just squeezing and pushing up. Oh, maybe I should do some rosettes. That would be pretty. If you ever are on Pinterest looking at desserts, this is a very modern way to plate, or I mean not plate, but you can tell I've been a restaurant chef. This is a very modern way to decorate a cake with all these different little textures and little doodads on the top. We have a question come in. What kind of cake is this? Chris has a question. Now, Chris, we started off, this is a basic vanilla cake, but what's cool about it is we took a basic buttercream and we added melted white chocolate to it, fresh raspberry jam, and then we also took straight up champagne and added it to it. So what I'm going to do, because whenever you make a cake, it would be a good idea to cover up this little seam. So let's do a bottom border. Just bear with me here. I'm going to try something I've never done before, but today is all about experimenting. I'm going to try to build a border that kind of complements that crescent shape. This buttercream smells fantastic. I can definitely smell all three flavors in here, the champagne, the strawberry, and the white chocolate. I'm a huge advocate for putting fresh fruit on the tops of cakes. I feel like, especially for a home chef, that's a very easy way to get a very beautiful show-stopping piece. So if I were to mound this with a bunch of strawberries or a bunch of fresh raspberries, and I put this on a beautiful cake stand, who wouldn't want to eat that? And the amount of effort is minimal, and it's very quick. This would be a great project for little kids, because literally all I am doing is I'm piping little rosettes on here. It's a very simple thing, and I've got 3 different tips that I'm using, and these are all Wilton tips that you can buy at, you can go to Walmart and get these. Yeah, so there you have her. So, Judy has a question. So we do have a YouTube channel. Judy's question is, where can I watch this? So after we're done here, we're going to post this on Facebook. We also have a YouTube station that we always post this to. My husband actually, for the YouTube versions, he condenses them down a little bit and he fills in my boring gap, so it's a little bit tighter. It's a little easier to watch. Love that, Brian Barney, for doing that for me. And we also, if anybody's curious, we have a really beautiful Instagram page that we take a lot of pride in, and we also have a blog on our website. So there's many different ways that you can get in touch with us and see what's going on in our world and what's new with me and with the bakery. I'm thinking about what is new this week, what I'm looking forward to this coming week. Tomorrow I think it's the channel 19 in the morning. I'm going to the Crescent and I'm going to make butterscotch pudding for their morning program. I'm really excited about that. And also this coming week, I am going to interview another employee, which is really fantastic. Our business has seen a huge uptick, and I'm definitely looking to hire somebody within the next couple months here. So if anybody knows anybody that would be a good candidate, please have them shoot me an email. I would really appreciate that. We're looking for somebody for an early morning AM baker who, I can teach somebody. I just need somebody who's fast and who's efficient and who has a good attitude, right? Because we're in the kitchen, we want to have people that have positive attitudes. So put the feelers out and let me know if anybody has anybody that they're that they know I'd want to come, at 4 a.m. and start baking in the morning. All right. You know what, everybody? So it's 7:43. I've showed you how to make this beautiful cake, and I think it's a good time for me to sign off. I accomplished what I wanted to do. If anybody has any requests for next week's, I haven't really thought about next week's, but I'm very open to your suggestions, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me talk. I'm always blown away by the amount of support that we get, and I just feel so humbled at times because people actually want to hear what I have to say, which is pretty fantastic. And I am very grateful for your support and for you listening to me. Once again, I am Jen Barney, and I'm the owner of Meringue Bakery, and I will see you next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Thank you so much.